What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner, riding solo yet again for another edition of our Daily Drop podcast series. Been pumping these things out all off season, and you know that if you were a subscriber. If you're not subscribed, first and foremost, what are you doing? Second of all, hit that subscribe button below, man. Hit that notification bell too, so you know every single time we upload. And obviously, as we get deeper into the season, as that starts to come around with fall camp, not too far away now, we'll be uploading even more content, including press conferences, podcasts, drops, all kinds of stuff. So if you want to get notified every single time we upload something, hit that notification bell. And guys, a little housekeeping item, as we always do. Got to do it. TarHeelIllustrated.com, premium subscription, $8.33 a month. Links in the description below. You can become a Carolina Insider too. You can join our awesome community over at TarHeelIllustrated.com. Not to mention earlier this week, on Monday, actually, Rivals rebranded their whole brand. A new website looks awesome. Also affects us with how our website looks too. If you want to go check that out, all you got to do is head on over to northcarolina.rivals.com, or as I like to say, TarHeelIllustrated.com. Again, links in the description below. Come on, get signed up for just $8.33 a month. All right, guys, Carolina football related drop. Interesting topic here, I think, for those who remember, who have seen it, or maybe who haven't seen it. 2 weeks ago, I did a basketball drop on what are expectations for the basketball team, realistic in the postseason. Last week, I did a drop for football. What are realistic expectations for Carolina football going into this season? Predicted my potential prediction for Carolina was 7-5, but I also kind of prefaced it by saying I think you can make a realistic case that this team could win 8 games, especially when you look at the schedule and it being, I don't want to say easy because it's never easy, but easier than some, and I would say easier than Carolina's had potentially in the past few seasons. So opportunities there for Carolina to win some games. I say all that to say that today we're going to be talking about kind of posing a question to you guys, posing a hypothesis and looking at both sides of it in terms of, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that Carolina's kind of going under the radar right now, not really being talked about at all amongst national media? Hasn't really been the case over the last few seasons, especially when you consider in 3 of the last 4 seasons, the Tar Heels have been ranked in the AP preseason poll, coming in at number 21 last season, number 10 in 2021, and number 18 in 2020. So very, very interesting question, and I think one that you can easily make a case on both sides for. So let's start with it being a potential good thing. Like I just said, 3 out of the last 4 seasons, Carolina's come into the season ranked in the AP preseason poll. That kind of tells you that expectations were high for this team. And I know AP rankings aren't always, especially preseason, you got to take them with a little bit of a pinch of salt, obviously, because at the end of the day, it's a guesstimate based on kind of what happened last year in the roster that's coming in for the new season. So I don't put too much credence in that, but we have to look at it because when you're a ranked team, especially when you look at 3 of those 4 rankings, Carolina getting as high as 10 in one of those, but all coming in, the top 21 essentially. The expectations have been expectations surrounding this team and surrounding this program the last 4 years too. I know Carolina wasn't ranked in the AP preseason poll last year in 2022, but did get up as high as 13. Drake made a lot of buzz around him coming into that season, and Carolina still had a lot of weapons and a lot of playmakers on that team, and obviously started off that season really well before unfortunately falling off a cliff and finishing 9-5. But let's look at the good part about, potentially going under the radar a little bit. You look at it, the 5 years Mac Brown's been here, and I guess you would say that Carolina's really, in terms of off season, not really been chatted about much, and obviously not been ranked 2 times. And I would say the least amount of chatter really was, at least in terms of expectations, was 2019 in Mac's first year. And again, that season you're playing with house money a little bit. You're coming into a new program that was on an all-time low, really, or maybe not an all-time low, but all-time low in the last, I'm trying to go back in my Carolina history and think. It had been a while since expectations were that low, in my opinion. Feel free to disagree if you want. But when you look at what happened over the last 2 years under Fedora, especially that last season, I mean, Carolina could barely beat a Division I team in the last 2 years under Fedora and really, really struggled mightily. So there was very low expectations. I wouldn't say very low expectations, but there were, from a national perspective, there's no one saying, oh, Carolina's going to, compete for the ACC this year and, be ranked in the top 20 or something like that. That wasn't it. So you could make a case that Carolina, in terms of the vibe around the program, obviously a lot of optimism back then. There was a lot of positivity back then because of, Matt coming back and, Sam Howell coming in as a true freshman and just, again, playing with house money a little bit. Well, it can't be any worse than it was the last couple of years. And funny enough, that's the only bowl game that Carolina's won in the 5 seasons under Mac Brown. I know they only finished 7-6, were never ranked during the season, but did have some close games. Obviously, almost beat Clemson in Chapel Hill. Had some, other close games that they could have won and potentially maybe should have won looking back. But Carolina, a decent season in his first year under Mac. And what that led to was higher expectations, especially when people looked and said, oh, wow, Sam Howell, this guy's pretty good. And so it's safe to say, I think, that in the 3 out of the last 4 years when Carolina's been ranked, they haven't lived up. They haven't really been able to live up to it. They've started this season well most times, barring the 2021 season, which obviously going up to Virginia Tech the first game and losing. That team was built up a ton before this season by the coaching staff, by the players. I know there was a kind of a narrative going around that was spewed from the coaching staff at the time after Carolina lost a couple of games that, well, the media overhyped you. I remember Mac Brown essentially saying that in a press conference. Like, no, you guys overhyped us. Wasn't true. It just wasn't. I mean, just go back and watch the spring practice press conferences and interviews with the coaches and Mac Brown. They hyped up that team because they thought they'd be a lot better than they ended up finishing 6 and 7. Again, ranked number 10 in the APC preseason poll. And that was obviously as high as it's ever gotten because they fell off a cliff really from minute one, ended up losing the Dukes Mayo Bowl and just a blowout. So I say all this to say, I know I'm kind of going off track a little bit. This is the first time, really, I would say, in 4 years that the expectations are as low as they've ever been. And you could easily make a case, well, maybe that's a good thing. Because Carolina really, there's 2 ways of looking at it, right? Let's look at last year as an example. Carolina coming into the season, AP preseason poll number 21. A lot of expectations, I think, around the team because of how good Drake May was, because of people being like, well, Gene Chizik, another year with the defense, they should be improved. Brought some nice transfers in. Me and AJ talked about how Carolina upgraded in the portal that offseason, and I think that ended up being correct when you look at some of Carolina's best players. 2 examples: Tez Walker, Elijah Huzzy, Nate McCullum in there as well, were transfers. So I think you can easily make a case that expectations, despite Carolina not being ranked in that preseason, despite Carolina only being ranked number 21 in that preseason poll, there were a lot of expectations amongst Carolina fans like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year that Carolina finally breaks through that ceiling, wins an ACC championship, and goes kind of marching off into the sunset, never looks back, and, wins 10 games, for the rest of Mac Brown's tenure. That's not what happened. Carolina started off the season really well, 6-0. They finished 8-5. They lost to Virginia at home. Never should have lost that game. I'm not going to run through them all. They lost to State. You guys know what else. I don't have to explain it to you. Georgia Tech. It's there. So Carolina, I think it's safe to say that you could sit there and say, well, they started off 6-0. They got up to number 10 in the country. It seems like they handled it well, but they lost to Virginia and they never recovered after that. So you could also make a case of, well, the expectations were high for this team, maybe not from a national media perspective, as high as it was from a Carolina fan base perspective, especially when you look at how they started the year. And then they fell off a cliff. And that leads into the point of expectations being probably as low as they have been under Mac Brown 2.0. This is the lowest expectations from a national perspective besides his first year. And from a fan perspective, it is 100% the lowest expectations, the lowest amount of interest, the lowest amount of excitement going into a new season that I've seen in the Mac Brown 2.0 era. And I don't think any Carolina fan would argue with me about that. I just feel free to if you want, but I don't know how you could argue that that's just not the case. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. And rightly so when you look at how the last 2 seasons ended with Carolina falling off a cliff towards the end of the year, losing their bowl games. And then you could even go back as far as 3 years again with that Sam Howell's last year where Carolina just was not very good and ended up finishing with a losing record and, falling off a cliff in the bowl game, unfortunately, with a really just abysmal performance against South Carolina. So you can make a case that, okay, expectations are low, lowest as they've been. Is this team playing with house money a little bit? Is this team looking at it being like, okay, well, nobody expects us to do anything. None of our fans really expect us to do much. We've got some nice parts on defense. We've brought some decent transfers in. Yeah, we got questions at quarterback, but we've got some talent there. Can Carolina, is a team, is Carolina sitting there and saying, okay, expectations are low, but we like that. Heck, we kind of need that because we've shown. Now, when I say we, I'm speaking from a person that I'm trying to put myself as someone who's on the team right now. That's what I'm speaking. I'm not saying we as North Carolina. I'm saying as if I'm someone on the team, this is the perspective they might have. Well, we haven't been able to handle expectations the last few years. When we've been hyped up and when we've hit the highs that we have in the last 4 years, we haven't been able to handle it. And we've essentially kind of fallen off a cliff after that, barring 2020. With Carolina, finishing 8-4, probably arguably best season under Mac, almost winning the Orange Bowl, getting up to his highest number 5, which is the highest ranking they've had in the Mac Brown 2.0 era. Can you make a case that, yeah, it's a good thing that Carolina doesn't have expectations right now? Maybe that benefits them in the long run. I think you can easily make a case. I do. Especially when you look at some of the guys returning, some of the talent on defense, new DC coming in. Expectations low over there still. I know from people who cover the team, expectations might be higher. Like, this defense should be better. But from a national perspective, nobody's really talking about Carolina. They like Jeff Collins, but nobody's expecting Carolina to be a top 75 defense this season, really. Some people are, I'm sure. And I think it's not unrealistic for that to happen. But again, until I see it with my own 2 eyes, I'm never going to come on here and say that's actually something that's going to happen. You're just not going to hear me do that. No proof for me to suggest. There's no proof in the pudding, as they say, to suggest that that's a realistic thing until we actually witness it, just because of how poor Carolina has been defensively, really, in the last 2008, maybe 16 years. It's not gonna come out of my mouth. So I think you can easily make a case that, yeah, low expectations, maybe that's a good thing for Carolina, because they've proven in the last few years they haven't really been able to handle it when they've had prosperity and when they've had good times and when things have kind of been looking up. Carolina just hasn't been able to get over that hump. They've fallen off a cliff and they've really, really struggled, which has led to expectations being as low as they are this year. So let's flip it. Is it a bad thing? I think it has to be, right? Because of what we just talked about. 2020, number 18 nationally preseason. High is number 5. Finish 18th. 2021, 6-7. Start off the year number 10 in the AP poll. Number 10, North Carolina. It's as high as it ever got. 6-7 finish. Blown out in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Sam Howell gone. Drake May era. Not preseason ranked, but expectations around that team. Get up to as high as 13. Win the Coastal in Wake Forest. 9-1. But you lose 4 straight, finish 9-5. Including the bowl game. Well, yeah, they could have won it. Maybe would have won it if they had some other guys playing that ended up opting out, but they lost. Doesn't really matter. Could have, should have, would have. No one cares who the loser was. It's all about who. Everybody loves a winner. They don't really care if, well, you almost beat Oregon. Who cares? Mac will say the same thing. It's not just me. I'm not mean or picking on anybody. Any athlete, any sports person, any coach, especially at this level. Doesn't matter if you win. Don't matter if you almost lose. You still lost. 2023. 21 to start the year ranked. Get as high as number 10, 6-0. Yeah, UVA coming into town, man. UVA. Did they even win a game after they lost to beat Carolina? And you go 6-0, starting it off, go 2-5 the rest of the season. You get blown out in Raleigh to end the year. You lose the Duke's Mayo Bowl again, second time in 3 years. A lot of guys missing. Good fight from the team. A lot of young guys playing. Showed kind of maybe, some young guys here. Maybe there should be some more optimism around the program, but you still lost again, like I said a second ago. So I say all that again to say there's been expectations around the program. Now there's not. It's as low as it's ever been. And the national media is one thing, whatever. But from a fan perspective, it's as low as it's ever been, in my opinion. Feel free to disagree. That's more worrying. So yes, I think you can look at it and say, you can ask the question, is it a bad thing or is it a good thing that Carolina doesn't have a lot of expectations going into this year? And I think you can make a case for each one that is basically equal to the other. And that's why I want to pose the question to you guys. Is the fact that Carolina has flared up, is the fact that Carolina has had some really good rankings during the season the last 4 years, is the fact that Carolina's had a lot of talent the last 4 years, all that in mind, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or is it a little bit of both, which I kind of lean towards, that expectations just aren't there this year? Because again, you can kind of be playing with house money a little bit and be like, well, nobody expects us to do anything, so let's go shock the world. Let's play with that chip on our shoulder. Maybe that fits Carolina as a football program a little bit better, because as we've seen, they haven't been able to handle prosperity. They haven't really been able to handle success when they've had it the last 5 years, 4 years. I don't really count that first year under Mac. Did some really nice things that year, and they've done some really nice things under Mac. I'm not just sitting here trying to be negative and be like, well, this program's failed under Mac, and they've knocked on the door and they just haven't been able to get over the hump, and they're never going to get over the hump. I don't want to be that kind of guy, but I have to call it out. I see it. So I want to hear from you guys. Good thing or a bad thing that expectations are low? Or like I said, like I kind of lean towards, you can make an equal case either way, really, and look at it in both ways and be like, yeah, I kind of see both sides here. I want to hear from you guys. Fascinating conversation, fascinating kind of topic. It's something I've spent time talking with Carolina fans about during the offseason over the last few years, but really this offseason in particular, kind of talking about, man, expectations are just low right now. Excitement's just low around this team. And again, there's a lot of question marks on this team. I don't think they're going to have a spectacular year this year. So I'm feeding into that narrative a little bit. But if you're a player on that team, if you're a coaching member staff, if you're on the coaching staff of the program, if you're a new guy coming in, maybe a transfer or a freshman, maybe you take that and you kind of run with it a little bit and you use it to your advantage and you have a really good year and you get people back on board. And you get the national media back on board and be like, okay, hadn't been great the last few years. Or it has been great at times, but Carolina's just fallen off a cliff again. Maybe we'll be looking back this time next year being like, man, Carolina figured some stuff out. Maybe there is reasons to be optimistic going into 2025. So again, we want to hear from you guys. Get involved at Jacob Turner, THI on Twitter, at Hill Illustrated on Twitter. Go check out our website. Again, complete rebrand and total revamp from Rivals. Looks spectacular. Go check that out. You can see the new interface and everything over there. And again, $8.33 a month, premium subscriber. Price hasn't changed in about 10 years since AJ took over. Less than a drive-through fast food restaurant meal wherever you go. I don't care what you say, it's going to be more expensive than that. Appreciate you guys watching as always. You can also get involved in our premium message boards. Just throw that in there as well. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear your opinion. And again, this is my opinion. It might be different than AJ's. It might be different than yours. It might be different than the other Carolina fan who doesn't watch this video. Maybe you bring this topic up to him in discussion. Maybe he disagrees. But we want to hear from you guys. That's what all these drops are about, just to start the conversation a little bit and look at things a little bit differently and analyze things a little bit differently. That's why we like to do this. So appreciate you guys watching as always. See y'all next time. And make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell too. Thanks.